Government Operations by Trent Scholten, Dylan Spencer, and Brett Steyer.
Privatization is the process of transferring ownership of a business, enterprise, agency, public service, or public property from the public sector, such as a government, to the private sector, where it is owned and operated by non-government parties. Many people support the privatization of government-provided public services. Studies show that private market factors can more efficiently deliver many goods or services than governments due to free market competition. Over time, this tends to lead to lower prices, improved quality, more choices, less corruption, less red tape, and quicker delivery. However, some people are not so supportive of certain types of privatization. They believe that certain public goods and services should remain primarily in the hands of government in order to ensure that everyone in society has access to them, such as law enforcement, basic health care, and basic education. In fact, some countries make statements within their own constitutions that list some services as absolute duties of the government, typically law enforcement. So has money always been a factor in American political life?
Well, I'd say at least till going back to the time of Andrew Jackson. Jackson made great use of patronage and a certain amount of what people who worked for the government and were hired as civil servants made was supposed to be kicked back to Jackson's campaign. They operated a lot of newspapers trying to appeal to the newly enfranchised common people. But by the same token, okay, Jackson's opponents, especially the people that were supporting the Bank of the United States, okay, were raising money to campaign against Jackson about 1832 or so. That business about the civil servants, now that eventually is going to be dealt with. You'll have in the 1880s less civil servants appointed by patronage, so you have the Pendleton Act, and you have to start to have a professional civil service. And then later on, the Hatch Act is going to keep the people who work for the government from actively involved in partisan politics altogether. Now, another big issue about the money in politics is how money was raised to influence state legislators, because there was a time when the state legislature would elect senators, and it was easy enough to bribe enough people in the legislature, okay, to elect a senator who would be favorable to whatever the business's position might be. That eventually is done away with by one of the progressive amendments, in the early 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt was very much against big money in politics. He spoke against it, and soon around his time there was a Senator Tillman who will propose a law to keep corporations from contributing. The only problem was that didn't have any enforcement provision, and you're really not going to get any enforcement provisions like that until the time of Watergate. The reaction against Nixon and the campaign to re-elect the president and all that type of thing led to amendments to the federal election campaign law. And at that point they set up the Federal Election Commission, which was supposed to at least enforce the limits on corporate spending.
In 2002, John McCain and Russ Feingold led the effort to pass the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, also known as the BCRA. The impact of the BCRA is still noticeable today in political campaigns. It decreased the role of soft money, as the law places limits on contributions by interest groups and national political parties. Additionally, the BCRA has a stand by your ad provision, which requires candidates for political office to identify with their ad. One recognizable was that, due to the provision, almost all campaign advertisements now include a verbal statement to the effect of, "My name is Danny Blazer, and I approve this message."
Buckley v. Valeo is a landmark case in American campaign finance law. In 1974, Congress overrode President Ford's veto to pass significant amendments to the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971. This created the first comprehensive effort by the government to regulate campaign contributions and spending. The reforms to the act limited contributions to candidates for federal office, required disclosure of political contributions, provided for the public financing of presidential elections, limited the expenditures by candidates and associates except for presidential elections, limited independent expenses to $1,000, and limited the candidates' use of personal funds. Senator James L. Buckley and former Senator E.J. McCarthy argued that the legislation violated the First and Fifth Amendment rights to freedom of expression and due process. The Supreme Court found that key provisions that limited expenditure at election campaigns was unconstitutional. The court upheld limits on contributions to candidates, mandatory disclosure, and voluntary government funding of campaigns. They also struck down limits on expenditures by candidates and independent people or groups, and struck down the direct appointment of FEC officials from Congress. Despite criticism of Buckley for being too protective of political spending and contributions and for not being protective enough, the case remains the starting point for judicial analysis of constitutionality of campaign finance restrictions. Citizen United versus FEC is a Supreme Court case in 2008. The conservative lobbying group Citizens United wanted to air a film critical of Hillary Clinton and advertise it with apparent violation of the BCRA. The District Court of the District of Columbia held that the BCRA prohibited Citizens United from advertising the film or paying it to be broadcast within 30 days of the 2008 Democratic primary. The Supreme Court reversed this decision, striking down those provisions of BCRA that prohibited corporations and unions from making independent expenditures. The majority decision overruled Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce and partially overruled McConnell versus the FEC in 2003. The case did not involve the federal ban on direct contributions from corporations or unions to candidate campaigns or political parties, which remain illegal in races for federal office. The United States Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs is the chief oversight committee of the Senate. The chairman is Tom Carper. He holds the power to issue subpoenas without a committee vote, the only chair that can do so. They have jurisdiction over Homeland Security and functioning of the government, which includes the National Archives, budget and accounting measures other than appropriations, the Census, Federal Civil Service, affairs of the District of Columbia, and United States Postal Service. The committee has 4 subcommittees. The Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations (PSI) is responsible for studying and investigating the efficiency and economy of operations relating to all branches of government. Financial and Contracting Oversight (FCO) focuses on ensuring the federal government spreads taxpayer money as wisely and effectively as possible. The efficiency and effectiveness of federal programs and federal workforce (FPFW) oversees the management, efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of all agencies and departments in the federal government. The last subcommittee is Emergency Management, Intergovernmental Relations in the District of Columbia (EMDC). It deals with disaster relief through oversight of FEMA and issues relating to the oversight of the District of Columbia.